The World Cup champion will be crowned this week, and you can trade the tourney through the finals on Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform. Right now, Spain is trading at 58% to beat Argentina, meaning 100 trade pays out $166 if they win. On Kalshi, you're trading against other people in a live market. No house, no odds makers. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code HOOPS to get $10 when you trade $10. KALSHI. Kalshi. Trade the beautiful game. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Send in your nominations now for the APN Awards. The APN Awards celebrate the best in archaeology, heritage, history, anthropology, museum, and cultural podcasts from around the world. Open to independent, academic, institutional, and network-produced shows, the awards recognize outstanding storytelling, research communication, production, hosting, and more. Award categories include Podcast of the Year, Best Educational Podcast, Best New Podcast, Best Interview, Best Storytelling Episode, Best Host, and several fun APN-only awards for those shows hosted on the Archaeology Podcast Network. Send in your nominations before the 1st of August 2026. Public voting will then be open from the 1st of September to the 1st of October 2026, and then will culminate in a live awards show on the International Day of Archaeology, so October 17th, 2026. Find out all information and send in your nominations through the Archaeology Podcast Network website.
Welcome to another episode of Ethnosynology. I'm your host, Evan Stout. I'm an anthropologist and archaeologist, and today let's just do a regular run-of-the-mill pod, especially for the audio listeners. I think this one will just be audio only. I'm too swamped with other stuff going on, but yeah, just update on everything. Book project is going well. I'll update you more on that. The course is going well. That's my course with Fluent Pet. I believe is the code for that. Anyway, not to go into that, but it's summer, so I'm all over the place. I've been traveling, also just been working super hard. Lots of stuff going on, but I guess we'll just start. Where to start? I guess I'll just start with fieldwork. Willow Springs, I have volunteered to help dig at the Willow Springs site outside. Well, I shouldn't exactly specify where it is, but southern Wyoming, near Colorado. And Willow Springs was originally it was a Paleo-Indian site, but it is originally excavated as an overland trail stagecoach station. And if you're not familiar, there was the Oregon Trail, which I guess is like the main one everyone knows, but then there's also the Mormon Trail, there's the Overland Trail. They all kind of overlap in a lot of ways, but the Willow Springs site was a stagecoach station on the Overland Trail. So not the Mormon Trail and not the Oregon Trail proper. And it wasn't exactly like a huge pit stop like I guess that Fort Bridger was at a certain point. This was basically a spot where people would come and swap and water their horses. And the reason that it was a good spot for this is there's a nice little pond there. I don't think there's a river, but a nice fresh water spot with a lot of edible plants and things you can eat there. It's also shade. I guess back in the shade there now. I guess 150 years ago, there was probably still shade there. But yeah, awesome site. It's been excavated by the University of Wyoming for a long time. Dennis Stanford excavated there when he was a student at Wyoming. Dennis Stanford famously wrote Across Atlantic Ice, which is the original Solutrean hypothesis book that was, eventually co-opted into having nefarious purposes. But the original hypothesis was, benign. The idea that people came across from France into the Americas that way because Solutrean points and Clovis points look similar in the Chesapeake Bay. But mainly just a legendary Wyoming archaeologist, and he ended up being the head curator of archaeology at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., which is, pretty cool. A pretty impressive feat to have for a small Wyoming guy to end up going and doing that. And just a prolific archaeologist. But yeah, Willow Springs had a lot of people that dug there. There's a lot of pottery on the surface. It's just like a multi-component campsite. There was obviously an indigenous encampment there for a long time, continuously occupied for a long time. There is the stagecoach station area where there is some bullet stuff. There's some points from, and I'm just trying to be very superficial with all this because I don't want to give too much information away on it. I'm not a lead researcher, I'm not a researcher, I should say, in general on the project. I've just been there a few times and visited. Glad to help dig. But yeah, I just kind of want to get into the fact that it is a multi-component, really cool site where it's just been continuously occupied for like 10,000 years. And because of that water and that fresh water spot, it's just been, you can find all kinds of archaeology there, that's kind of the cool part about Wyoming too, because everyone's like, why didn't you like live in Wyoming? Why'd you go to school in Wyoming? Well, Wyoming's super undeveloped in comparison to, let's say, New Jersey or New York or even, Southern California. There's still tons of stuff on the surface too. And due to its dryness and its like aridity in a lot of places in Wyoming, artifacts are just on the surface as they were for 13,000 years. I guess 12,000 years in Wyoming, 11,000 years. But yeah, just super good preservation. Everything's on the surface. You don't have to dig a bunch of shovel tests in the middle of a forest and get through the plow zone and then get through all of the root layer and get through a bunch of, I'm exhausted. That Yellowstone is also what we're going to talk about here. I just got back from Yellowstone like yesterday, but we'll get to Yellowstone. But yeah, Wyoming is just cool like that. And when I worked on the National Guard base, and that's also a thing I need to bring up here too. I went there this week too. Yeah, like when I worked in the National Guard base in Guernsey, the military they bought up a bunch of private land and started testing missiles and things like that, or just, own the land. So as a federal agency, the military department, they have to have archaeologists and geologists and paleontologists come in and check the land for what's there, for the natural and cultural resources, and tons of archaeology, Shoshone stuff. The Oregon Trail and the Overland Trail goes right through it. Lots of cool stuff. But again, a lot of stuff obviously is buried, but there's just so much stuff just on the surface. And we spent one summer just surveying. So walking every day, like 10 to 12 miles a day, just like with walkie-talkies in a line, surveying the area for what potential archaeological sites. And we'd find points, we'd find pottery, we'd find all sorts of stuff, Oregon Trail type stuff, cowboy belt buckles and things like that, stuff from ranchers that have been there probably over 100 years and things like that. So really cool. So with that, Willow Springs is a similar kind of thing. There's stuff on the surface, but there's also stuff buried beneath it. And what we were excavating this year was a Bison antiquus, which is an ancient bison. I wouldn't want to say much larger than a modern bison, but like think of the biggest bison you've ever seen, or if you think of a modern American bison, just like that plus a half. It was pretty big. I wouldn't say it was like twice the size, but it was a big ass animal, and bison are huge. So excavating that, and it was dug by the state archaeologist, Dr. Spencer Pelton, who's been a guest on this podcast multiple times now. And yeah, he was digging it out, and he was just like, hey, are you available to like come help dig? We have a volunteer session. And I was like, yeah, sure. And he had to get this, Bison antiquus skull out of the ground. And this is this area of the site, the field school with the University of Wyoming Anthropology Department had been there earlier in the summer too, and helped dig this out. And then we kind of finished it out. Found a projectile point with it, but it was mixed context. It wasn't in the same stratigraphic level as the bison, but there were flakes, and it was clear that this bison was either butchered or something to do. There was human activity there, right? There's cultural material. So that was pretty cool in itself. And I guess kind of like that mammoth episode that I did, put it this way, I just got there. The excavation block was already opened. People are actively digging on it from the night before. There's tarps all over the bones in the morning. Take the tarps off, set up the electronic distance machine, also known as a total station, or an EDM, and get that kind of zeroed in. You want to make sure that there's certain areas of the site where you get this exact elevation, its exact northing and easting. So it's exact GPS coordinate on the landscape, on the planet, where this is. And then from there, you can tell exactly where those artifacts are facing north, facing east, and where they are in elevation. Elevation being, more important in archaeology because you're digging down. I guess they're all important. But yeah, so you set that up. The first day I got there, I just kind of came in. I know how to work the machine. So I was just like, all right, I got it. And people will check their level depths. So you can use the machine. And if you're not familiar with that machine, when you're driving by a construction site on the side of the road, there's always a guy looking into like a little camera thing on a tripod, and then a guy holding a big pole that's usually red, kind of looks like a barbershop pole, or red or orange, just so you can see it, And there's a little thing, and a laser shoots from the machine onto the pole, which is called a stadia rod, and that checks your northing, easting, and elevation. So a lot of times people are just digging, and rather than take a line level and a ruler and do that whole thing, see where you're at depth wise. You can just take a quick shot with that machine, and it's kind of faster that way, and just know where you're digging. So if you're digging from 65 centimeters to 60 centimeters, you want to check, and it's like you're at 62. So you need to go 2 more centimeters down, kind of thing. I did that. I also helped excavate the next day, kind of gophering around, just like running point. And then the next day, I excavated, found a bunch of flakes, found a bunch of tools. I didn't find the tools. I found a bunch of flakes, though, a bunch of bones. And every time you find a bone, you write down its field specimen number, assign it one, put it into a bag, and then you check what's called the dip and strike, or the inclination and the declination of the artifact, where it's sitting in place. Is it facing north? Is it facing south? Is it going negative 90 degrees into the ground, or is it laying flat? That way, when you get a huge spatial blow up of the site later, with all the data points, you can see where all these artifacts are sitting in deposition and things like that in the ground. So doing that and checking all that information, then you get the field specimen number, then you take the total station, map it in place, then you put that information down in the notes, and each level you dig down has its own set of notes where you're seeing, we found roots in this layer, we found a stain or a possible, feature, there's a hearth feature here, there's fire cracked rock, a lot of flakes coming out of it. Just like there's something on every level that you want to write down. And that way, when someone's in the lab analyzing all this stuff, they can kind of piece together what was going on in each level, especially if there's a discrepancy or there's something of note they want to look at, or something questionable. They're like, what is that? And then they look at someone who was excavating it, and you're like, oh, there was a huge hole in this one, or a shovel test had already gone through it. You can see like what's going on with that hole, that unit. Yeah. And then kind of like with the mammoth, once the bones are excavated all the way out, they're pedestaled, and then you put some paper towels over them, wet the paper towels, then put a cast on it, just like you'd put a cast on your arm if you broke your arm. And then once that dries, you take that out and flip it, and then take it to the lab and excavate it out of the cast later. It helps the bones preserve, since they're 10,000 years old and super fragile. And also an easy way to transport them. And yeah, that was pretty much it. Just a fun thing. It was with the Office of the Wyoming State Archaeologist. So Spencer has it pretty down. The previous position of that was Greg Pierce. And then before that was George Frizen, who retired and recently passed, I believe in 2021. But yeah, so super cool excavation, just like, and I guess I'm hammering this aspect here. It wasn't full of students. It wasn't full of new people that have never dug before. It was like people that have already dug, that knew what they were doing. Spencer could trust them, and we just kind of dug and, everyone knew what they were doing, which I found fun. And like, there were a few, like, I haven't dug in a year or two here, so I had to ask a few questions, like, what do we do with this? Or what do we do with that? Things like that. Especially as you're digging, there's some things that pop up to you, like, well, how do you want me to map this? Should I map this, kind of thing? But for the most part, just like a well-oiled machine. It was really cool to see that. And again, and Spencer, if you're listening, just, whatever. But yeah, I went to school with him. So like, he was a PhD student when I was a master's student. So it's really cool to see him, when I knew him as a student, we would like hang out then. And then now he's the state archaeologist, which is like the coolest position in archaeology, I think, at least in Wyoming, or like in the West. He just has like free reign to excavate most things that pop up, or he gets to go investigate things on ranch land and stuff that pop up. There's a lot of bureaucracy stuff that goes on with it too, but for the most part, like, just a super cool position where the summer is filled with field work, the winter is filled with research and writing and reports and teaching and doing like bureaucratic and political stuff. So cool job. And it's just like fun that you get to, especially for a volunteer session like this, which is how a lot of archaeological sites work that I've worked at. It's all volunteers, usually, who know what they're doing, and it's just like a fun, well-oiled machine in that sense. So that was that. I don't want to speak too much on it because I'll probably do another episode on Willow Springs eventually, or like an in-depth, fun interview one like I usually do, but it's just not my site. I'm not part of the team. Like, I was just there volunteering. I don't want to say too much about it, but that's just summer archaeology. Yeah. So that was fun. And then I went to, before we go to the commercial break, I'll just say this too, why I brought up Guernsey, is I went to Guernsey to help Blake Griffin, who is the archaeologist for the National Guard base there, who was hosting what was, I think, Laramie Range Adventure for Veterans was the company, or the nonprofit. And it was a bunch of combat vets who do hiking and like fun events and stuff like that around the Laramie Range. And they were out there excavating and digging, a small unit that was a check dam. So it was already mixed context soil that wasn't, they weren't digging a fresh new ground, and like it wasn't an academic dig. It was just like hey, this dirt has been moved, but it's settled. We can dig down into this. There will be flakes, there will be bone, and you can get practice digging. I thought it was really cool. And then Damien Kirkwood and I and John Laughlin went there to do a napping demonstration and show them how to nap, but also just got to dig, and just a fun day. Because if you don't remember me from when I was on A Life in Ruins with Carlton and Connor, I worked for the Veterans Curation Program, which was a curation program funded by the Army Corps of Engineers, where we curated archaeological and cultural material from Army Corps of Engineers jurisdiction land. So like anything in the Southeast kind of came through my lab. A lot of mound stuff, a lot of historic stuff from a township site. Really cool. So all that said, I worked with veterans for almost 4 years there. And like, that was my Malinowski time. I wasn't in the Pacific studying people in the South Pacific. I wasn't in Africa studying chimps like Goodall or Carson, but I was working day to day, managing a lab full of U.S. Army veterans or U.S. military veterans. There were Marines and Air Force and Coast Guard as well, and Navy. But yeah, just dealing with that population of people and like learning about them and stuff. So it was kind of fun to do that in the field with like combat vets who had crazy stories about Afghanistan and like all over the place, in Korea and places they were stationed, and just hanging out, drinking, smoking cigars like at night, fun stuff. Yeah, super, super cool. A good time. Flint napped. John Laughlin and Damien are really good flint nappers, so it was fun to do that. And just like just a fun time. Those guys were clearly having like some of the time of their life, just hanging out together, doing archaeology in this really pretty place. And that objectively, people might say that part of Wyoming is like the least pretty. Actually, Rawlins is the least pretty to me. But yeah, just rolling green hills. It's just beautiful to me. And like, I guess it's not Yellowstone, I guess why I'd say people might say it's not the prettiest. But if you just look up Guernsey, Wyoming, or Wheatland, Wyoming, Laramie Peak, things like that area, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's just like beautiful rolling green hills. The Guernsey Reservoir, Guernsey State Park, beautiful spot. And you can see like the thunderstorms in the background, like on the landscape as far as the eye can see, like going on in the distance, lightning. So cool. It's just very humid. Most of Wyoming's not humid, but I'm getting into the weeds of that. Great time. It was like fun field work doing that, then doing that, and hopping back to their place where I used to work for years. Yeah. So with that, we're going to do a quick commercial break, and we're going to talk about my time in Yellowstone, which was super cool.
The World Cup champion will be crowned this week, and you can trade the tourney through the finals on Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform. Right now, Spain is trading at 58% to beat Argentina, meaning 100 trade pays out $166 if they win. On Kalshi, you're trading against other people in a live market. No house, no odds makers. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code HOOPS to get $10 when you trade $10. KALSHI. Kalshi. Trade the beautiful game. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory.
And we are back to episode 41 of Ethnos. Almost 41 episodes. Wow. 41 of Ethnosynology. Yeah. So I talked about Willow Springs. I talked about Guernsey, working there again, digging in a hole where I dug for almost 10 years ago now for 2 summers straight. It was like a blast from the past. Really cool to just like survey that land and like look around for points and arrowheads of bifaces on the landscape. It was just like, it brought me back. It was really fun. But since I got sick, it's hard to, I got really sick, and it fucked my hands up and my feet up. So after a certain point, like I get like pins and needles in my feet. So especially digging, like my legs go numb really fast. It's that feeling you get when your hands are really cold. Like if you stick your hands in snow, I have that kind of like permanently. The pain has gone away, but the numbness is still there. And then my feet, for sure. Like when you sit cross-legged on the floor and your feet go numb, it's like I get that instantly now. It doesn't take 5 minutes. It's like an instant thing. And that's a whole other thing. But that I've done a million tests to figure out what it was, and they ruled out diabetes. They ruled out like it's a specific kind of paralysis thing, but I got really sick. I got what's called Guillain-Barré. I think I talked about this before. Maybe I don't want to, if you've already heard me say this, sorry. But yeah, so I just have like permanent neuropathy in my hands and feet. And it's a lot better than it was, but it's still like, it's not painful anymore, put it that way. For like 2 years, it was like extremely painful and very annoying. Now it's just annoying. And I'm kind of testing, like, I don't think I could stand and monitor all day again. I don't think I could survey all day. Like I don't think I could walk 10 miles every day. My feet would just be like rough, but I think I could. And that they put me on something called gabapentin, which is like a nerve painkiller, and it worked, but I just kind of felt like not high all day, just like tired. I don't like it. So yeah, it's just annoying. So I did get to dig. Standing at the toll station all day, my feet did hurt, but it wasn't like the end of the world because I could sit. But like if I was surveying for 10 miles a day for 8 hours a day, don't know if that would bode well for me. I have to figure that out. But yeah, excavating wasn't terrible. Someone's yelling outside my window. There's these kids that like, they just hit balls onto my roof all the time. And I think they do it on purpose at this point. I'm just turning into the old man now whose like feet don't work. But anyway, Yellowstone. This guy named Evan Stout had messaged me years ago being like, hey, if you're ever out here, dude, like I'd love to show you around. And like, just, you know, he does Yellowstone Wildlife Guide Company as his company. And he's just a guide, wildlife guide, and takes people out, look for wolves, look for owls. And whether you just want to spot the animals or you want to photograph them or just have a tour of the park, it's kind of what he does. And yeah, so I couldn't go for years because I had the bus. And then, how would I phrase this? Like, didn't want to drive my bus all the way to Yellowstone and like have it break down, you know? So I waited till I had a car. And then like last summer, I just didn't think to message him. And this summer I was like, hey, I'm actually free. And I remember it's a specific window in June when the wolves are most active, which is why this is a thing. So I remembered like, oh shit, I'm free in June this weekend. Like, let me message this guy. So I went, drove all the way up there, and the drive from Laramie to Yellowstone is nuts. Just like plains and like low hills and stuff like that. And then you get to like the Bighorn Basin where Cody is. And it's just like, and you go through the Wind River Reservation, and like the dam and the reservoir there is super cool. And it's like, almost looks like you're driving through Arizona without the cacti. You just like, it's just like that arid red ground like that. And then you drive and you get to Cody, and it's kind of like that too, just like a basin, like where it's gray and deserty, kind of reddish gray. And then as you drive from Cody up, and I went all the way up to Montana, like this little thing called the Chief Joseph Byway, Chief Joseph Scenic Byway, I think is what it's called. One of the prettiest drives I've ever done in the country. I was just like, every turn, I was like, oh my God. And I wanted to get out of the car and take pictures, but one, pictures can't do it justice. And two, I just didn't have time because I was meeting this guy at 6:30, and I had no signal for most of that drive all the way to Montana to where I was meeting in a place called Cook City, Montana, which is just north of Yellowstone. And it was kind of funny because it was like, let's meet at 6:30 at this cafe. And I had no signal. So it was just kind of like, it was like in the 80s. You just like had to, you know, hope you guys both got there at the same time. It was kind of cool. I was just like, oh, hey, man. And him and his friend Rebecca, I believe was her name. We just like got dinner and talked, shot the shit. And like she'd moved there to be a photographer. So like she just fell in love with it, moved from California to there. Evan had moved there from Maine. He'd lived all over the world, I think, or traveled all over the world. Anyway, I don't want to give too much about their personal lives away. I don't know how much they want me saying, but met up with them, made the arrangements for the next morning, what we're going to do. And I then go just like car camp because I'd been car camping in Guernsey the few days before, and just car camped. And like, I just pulled into a campsite that was on a national forest that I probably needed a pass for, but I just like went, I was like, whatever. And then like, it's just crazy because you're up there and there's grizzlies like all over the place. There's wolves there, but they're more in the park. But you'd run into a grizzly before you run into a wolf, and wolves aren't going to mess with you. But grizzlies, just like bear boxes everywhere. And it's like, hey, put all your food inside a bear box, make sure it's sealed, the kind of thing. And then I'm sleeping in my like car, forgot my bear spray. I know I have some somewhere. I couldn't find it. And I was like, whatever, they'll have extra. And then just like slept in the car, woke up at 4:30 in my car. And like, I was like, oh, and I don't have like it's like a Nissan Murano. So I don't have the most room in there. And I'm like trying to change in like the pitch black. And then I don't have a flashlight. I'm using my phone. It was a mess. And then it was like the Google Maps, it was 57 minutes. Told me it was like 40 minutes. And then I was like maybe 5 minutes late. But then I basically would have been there on time. But something, if you've never been to Yellowstone, is people just stop on the side of the road or like in the middle of the road to like see something, especially tourists, especially like midday. And then traffic like kind of stops, and there's bison that walk across the road, and you got to stop and wait for them. That's the law. And it could be like 2 bison, it could be a whole herd. And then the park rangers come and like direct traffic and stuff. So yeah, I get stuck behind people that are like stopping and starting, and I'm already like 5 minutes late. So yeah, I get there a little late, but that's fine. And then I just hop in the car or the truck with Evan, and I'm going to have him on the podcast to like talk about everything he knows. So I don't want to get too much into that, but I just want to explain what I did. This dude was incredibly knowledgeable about everything wildlife in Yellowstone and everything like ecology, history. Like we were talking about like Jim Bridger and this guy named Coulter and like Lewis and Clark. And then like the cavalry used to run Yellowstone after Grant made it a park, which I would have thought it was Roosevelt that made it a park, but it was actually Grant, like after the Civil War. Anyway, great book on it that I just ordered. Undaunted Courage is the Lewis and Clark one, but Empire of Shadows is the book on the history of Yellowstone that's super good. And that's about Coulter. I believe it's Coulter. How he explored Yellowstone. And like, if you've never been to Yellowstone, first of all, like if I've said this before on the podcast, but like if I were an extraterrestrial were to like abduct me and like probe me or whatever, and they're like, where would I go first? I'd be like, you got to go to Wyoming. This is crazy. Like you have, like, I guess they abducted me in Wyoming. Maybe they abduct me like on Long Island as a kid and whatever. This is getting into the weeds, but I'd be like, you need to go check out Wyoming. Maybe look at New York City. Like the museums are cool, but so is the pizza and the bagels. But Yellowstone is insane. And like, kind of like that Chief Joseph Byway, at a certain point, I was just like, I don't have a camera that can like zoom in and get pictures of the wildlife from a mile out. So it's moot on that. But as well, just every direct, even if I had the fanciest lens, like $1 million lens, like there's no way that you can take a picture in any direction of Yellowstone and like do it justice. You have to be there. And it's like, Evan and I were talking about this too, but like, I mean, just being among the wolves and being not among them. I'm not like, you know, like Jane Goodall, like hanging out with them, but you can see wolves a mile out. You can see grizzlies a mile out. Like we saw a brown bear like right next to the car, you know, some kind of civic groundhog thing, bison everywhere, elk, deer. There are moose there. I've never seen a moose in Yellowstone yet, but the moose are pretty elusive anyway. I've seen them down here in Laramie. But long story short, you cannot take a picture of that place and do it any bit of justice. You have to go there. And anyone listening to this podcast, if you're like, oh, I wonder where I'll go on vacation next year. Fuck Puerto Rico, dude. Puerto Rico's cool. I've never been. If you're going to go to Disney again, don't spend the money on Disney. Go to Yellowstone. Just rent a car and drive around and just be like, oh my God, this is cool. And you can see why they made it a national park in this place. There's like something going on there, dude. It's just like, whether it's the volcanic activity underneath it or just how high up it is, or just the fact that it's been, you know, made a national park for over 100 years now, like, how like magical it is, I guess would be the way. And I'd been there years ago. Like when I came out to tour Wyoming, when I came out to move into Wyoming for grad school, I went out with my parents and we just drove around, and we're from New York and Tennessee. And we're like, what? This is crazy. But now I'm there with a guide who's like, hey, the wolf dens are in this spot and this spot. And we bounced between these 2 wolf dens. And at both spots we saw wolves. The first part though, and he's got this big $3,000 probably scope thing. I don't know what it's called, like not a sniper scope, but it looks like the scope you'd put on top of a gun, but like a binocular at the same time on a tripod. There's a word for this and I'm lost here. But anyway, yeah, you're looking through the scope and the wolves are like 1.5 miles out and there's always people lined up. And I was like, what are we looking at? And he was like, Canis lupus, bro. And I was like, oh my God. It is the Rescue Creek pack. Black wolves, some of them are collared. And a lot of the packs had lost their puppies due to distemper this year. But this pack had puppies, and like not only do we see puppies, like, and then like the subadults and the adults trying to like initiate play and like throwing sticks into the air, but at a certain point we like hear them all howl, and Evan's like, do you hear that? They're howling, and I was like, oh my God. And then there's all these people around, most of them professional photographers, professional observer people like he is, and then also just tourists that are there with fancy equipment. And then another thing, like I said in Yellowstone, people stop and pull over. So if there's people looking at something with a bunch of binoculars, tourists will stop over and be like, what do you look? It's kind of like a zoo, but like, you know, an active, there's no enclosures. The whole place, you're in the enclosure. You're just driving, like a safari. I guess the safari is the word. And people are coming by and looking at it. And then everyone's like, shh, they're howling. And like, everyone just kind of stops for like a second. And like, you can hear the wolves howl. And that was, I couldn't have expressed this to him other than just like giving him a hug. But like, this was one of the coolest things I've ever done. And like, I'm not up close and like, I think it'd be way cooler if I was like hiking into like the wilderness and like I, was face to face with the wolf or whatever. Like my friend did that in Vancouver Island. I mean, it's scarier and riskier, but like just the other side of this is you're, in a safe spot on the road. You're giving them distance too. So like that's kind of more important, more than my safety, but I want to make sure the animals are safe and not going to be, fucked with by people. But like you're with all these people that are there to see just that, like to bask, I guess that's the word, in the awe, I guess would be the word, of like wolves. And he's saying to me too, like, it's super cool because like when you're watching a grizzly or you're watching bison, you don't have, I mean, if you have cows, bison operate similarly, I guess. You don't really see a bear operate in your house, like in the area. I guess raccoons are similar to bears, but you can observe wolf behavior and it's familiar to you. It's a little different, obviously, because it's a wild animal, but you can observe wolf behavior well because you know how dogs operate. And obviously there's differences and stuff like that, but you know what the tail behind its leg means, you know what rolling on its back and playing is, like you're used to that. And like bears don't roll on their back and play like dogs do. They do, but like you don't see it as much, right? Bears are usually solitary unless they're with the cubs with their mother. They're not really doing that. Bears fight a lot, or at least, what's the word? Not present. What's the word? Standoff? Nope. There's a word for this. Not postulate. It's something like that. Prostrate? Nope. That's laying down. Oh man, they're going to kill me. I don't remember this word. Fronting or stepping, I guess would be the slang term for it, but they posture. There you go. They like stand up and like pretend they're going to attack each other, but it's like kind of just like a, sizing each other up kind of thing. And sometimes they don't attack. And like coyotes will sometimes do that too. And like a lot of wild animals will like try not to revert to violence. They just kind of like will push each other away or like, things like that. But getting into the weeds, yeah, just super cool. And you're all these people are there to see that same thing. And that was really cool. Like just sharing that moment with people. And then we watched them play for enough time. And then we're like leaving and there's people that he knows. And then there's a guy named Rick McIntyre who I met a guy named George Buman the week before at Willow Springs, who's like a super famous and like renowned dude up there who's like done bird calls, but he's like known for his bird calls. He's an ornithologist, he's written books. And the book was Eavesdropping on Animals in Yellowstone, I want to say. Eavesdropping on Animals and What We Can Learn from Wildlife Convos is the book. You should look that up. I have it. I'm starting to read it right now. George told me to reach out to a guy named Rick McIntyre and read his books. And Rick McIntyre I met when I was there, and Evan was like, hey, this is Rick McIntyre. I was like, oh my God, I just heard about you. And he's out there every day, sitting in his car, and then he gets out with a scope and observes the wolves. He's written 2 books on them, and I believe it's the Rick McIntyre, Rise of Wolf 8 and Reign of Wolf 21. And those are like wolf specimen names that are at the park. Those are 2 of his books. And I'm meeting this dude, and Evan's like, hey, this is David. He's an archaeologist. He's like writing a book on the history of dogs and stuff like that. And then the guy was like, what's it about? And I explained like a little bit. It was like dog domestication in Siberia, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, what was the first book I should read of yours? And like, if there's any wisdom you have, like, what would it be? And then he said something that was like super cool. And this is a guy who observed wolves like most of his adult life, is that there is no closer relationship in the animal kingdom than the one that like humans, or similar relationship, between humans and wolves. And that was like super cool to hear from like a wolf expert. Because I kind of gathered that from reading about it, and I've heard other people talk about wolves, but just like to see a guy who's there every day observing them say that was like sick, And we bounce around to this other part of the park where we see wolves, bison, and grizzly, and the wolves are like laying, it's a mile out. And if I was looking through the scope, I would not have known those were wolves. They were like laying in the sagebrush, kind of sleeping. What Evan does is every day, and he's like pointing, he's like, those are 2 wolves. And again, he's got this fancy ass scope, and all these people are coming up with their cameras and their binoculars, and they can't see shit. And then you can put the phone onto that scope with the camera, like a little magnet that holds it there, and you can see it through the phone. And I'm pointing to this little, I think she was, I want to say Korean. I can't remember what she was. Doesn't matter. But from some East Asian country, spoke English, and but with a heavy accent. And she was like, what are you looking at? And I was like, here. And I point to these 2 little dots on the screen. She's like, oh, okay. Like, not that she thought I was crazy, but she couldn't see him. And then her husband was using his camera to like kind of see it. And like, you couldn't see anything. So it's cool knowing like You're not going to have those encounters like that close in Yellowstone. Some people do. And one guy showed us a video of the wolves like running, chasing an elk across the road and stopping traffic. And I was, dude, I would have shit my pants. And I could tell he wasn't like a cursing kind of guy. He was just like, buddy, I would have too. I almost did. But then he was like, I was cussing and trying to get my phone out of my pants. And there was like, it just super cool. But everyone there is just like hyped on it. And then this other dude, he was kind of like, not, I wouldn't say lingering, but he was just like kind of hanging around with us for a minute. And I could tell after a while, I was like, oh, he wanted to show me the pictures he took. Because I think they thought I was a guide too, but I'm wearing the same green jacket as Evan. They probably thought we were guides with the fancy scopes and stuff, or like park rangers. There's no Mounties there, but you're just like, wearing just park rangers and stuff. We weren't that. And this guy was like, yo, check it out. And he like showed me this really sick picture of a grizzly he got earlier. And I was like, bro, what? And yeah, he was just like kind of hanging out, and like people come and nerd out. And this one guy was like, oh, I've met you before. And I was like, I don't think so. Maybe he saw me on the internet, maybe, but I think they thought I was like a guide or something. But yeah, just like people popping in and out, and then people asking questions, because we kind of looked. I'm wearing a jacket that says Yellowstone on it. I bought it at the gift shop the night before because I forgot my rain jacket. Sick jacket though. And people are like asking us questions about the wolves and stuff. That was super fun. I don't want to get too much into that, but just sharing in what people come to Yellowstone for is to experience like how it's just like the wildest place. I wouldn't say the wildest place. I'm sure like northern Canada is, or like the depths of Siberia in Russia, but like in the United States, it's a pretty wild place, and like people come to see that, and they're like, oh my God, a grizzly, wolves. And like, everyone's like a wolf, and they like want to see it. Super cool, man. Like it was nuts. But then we're driving back and forth, and like him and I are just like vibing on like ecology and archaeology, and we're talking about Lewis and Clark and Captain Cook and like other books that we're just swapping like book recs, and like it was really cool to like hang out with this dude who like respects my intelligence. And then like I felt bad asking him so many questions, but obviously it's his job. And just like going back and forth about like the history of the park, and he shows me this cool like obsidian cliff area. The lake, like Yellowstone Lake I completely forgot Yellowstone Lake is up there, and it just looks like an ocean at the top of this mountain. You're like, oh my God. Yeah. And it's June and it's snowing and like raining and like sleeting. And when I was leaving the park, it was certainly snowing and sleeting, and it's June. And like, I did feel bad. There's like a lot of kids that come out of the car. They're like in shorts and a t-shirt, not expecting it to be that cold. It's like, I guess it's kind of on the family, not telling them that. Or checking the weather, but I don't remember it being that cold when I was there. I remember having to wear a hat and a jacket, but I was like shivering this time in June, mind you. Yeah. Anyway, I'm getting all over the Yellowstone Lake, and then he showed me the cavalry barracks that used to be there, because the cavalry used to operate and run the park before like the park rangers took over. The same cavalry that killed all the bison, but. Yeah, and then he was telling me the history of like how the bison got back there, and there was just like ranch in Texas, and there was just like, I think a Blackfoot guy in Montana had a pack or a herd, and the government bought it from him, and then started the breeding program and all that. And then like how the wolves aren't from Yellowstone, they're brought from Canada, and that's problematic in its own way, but also back in the day they would have had a range probably that big anyway. So there's like swapping stories back and forth about like history and archaeology, and just like kind of vibing, and then like just taking a stop, and he's like, you want a muffin? And I was like, yeah, sure. Just both of us like smashing a muffin on like the shores of Yellowstone Lake, just nerding out about ecology. Was like super, super cool. But I should wrap this pod now, but yeah, I guess I'm going to have him on. I'm going to have that George Buman guy on, because he has wolves in his backyard. He was showing me videos of them hunting and stuff. I want to ask him stuff. And sorry, I just dropped my ring. And then that Rick McIntyre guy, I'm going to have him on as well. But yeah, so that'll be like a Yellowstone ecology video, and then one about wolf, ecology, and like a guy who like watches wolves all the time. And I'm at this weird juncture now where people are like, hey, you need to do more dog videos. And then I do a dog video and it gets zero traction, but then I'll do the archaeology videos and it does really well on YouTube. So I'm just going to keep doing a mix of both, I think, because that's what I like doing. But this will be audio only, so if you want to leave comments on Spotify or just shoot me an email or DM. I have way too many DMs. I haven't checked. Like, I've been out of signal for a while. There's like 50 I have to get to, so apologies if I haven't gotten to your messages. I try my best. Usually it's someone calling me out or saying something, mean. So you can only look at so many a day. Put it that way. I have comment days and I have DM days where I like check and I'm like, who's calling me out for what? And you have to be in the mood. But anyway, all that said, thank you for hearing me rant. Sorry, this is off the cuff audio episode, but I just kind of wanted to talk about all this and put it somewhere. Super cool stuff. This is not an award-winning episode, I'll tell you that. But yeah, just shout out to Evan Stout. That was the coolest thing, dude. If you're listening, that was like, I posted it, but like one of the coolest days of my life. That was just like super, super cool. And to anybody listening, again, go to Yellowstone. If you've never been, I guess Yosemite might be similar. I've never been to Yosemite. At least it's similar in like how pretty it is. But Yellowstone was like nuts, dude. And again, I've been there before, but this time it was like eye-opening to see like all different aspects of how it works, and like hearing about like the park and how it works with, because it's all under NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Agency, and the Park Service, and how similar that is to archaeology, because we're also under NEPA and the Environmental Protection Act and things like that. Cultural resources are different than natural resources, and zoology and biology and ecology are different than archaeology and anthropology, but it's all similar science, you know, that's operated the same way legally under the federal government. So pretty cool. I'm talking about endangered stuff. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent, but thank you all for listening. Got tons of cool videos coming out. I've just been slammed. They will be done soon. If you want t-shirts, merch, pants, shirts, stickers, that's on my website, davidhowe.com/store. If you want to book a private meeting with me for office hours or for media consultation, that's also on my website. And if you want my hour-long special is on YouTube, that is the history of dogs. But if you want the 3-hour extended version of that, is on fluent.pet/David with a Fluent Pet, and that's a 3-hour course on the history of dogs, and look for that there. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Please rate and review the podcast, and please listen to anything on the Archaeology Podcast Network that isn't my podcast. Well, listen to more of my podcast if you want, but there's also other shows on there. And then shout out to Evan Stout and Yellowstone Wildlife Guide Company. Please check that out. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. The Archaeology Podcast Network's chief editor is Rachel Roden. Our executive producer is Ashley Airy. Our social media and newsletter coordinator is Matilda Siebrecht. The APN was founded by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle on December 1st, 2014. We're supported by our amazing podcast hosts, many volunteers, and listeners like you. Check out membership at www.archpodnet.com/members.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
The World Cup champion will be crowned this week, and you can trade the tourney through the finals on Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform. Right now, Spain is trading at 58% to beat Argentina, meaning 100 trade pays out $166 if they win. On Kalshi, you're trading against other people in a live market. No house, no odds makers. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code HOOPS to get $10 when you trade $10. KALSHI. Kalshi. Trade the beautiful game. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory.